Well, I haven't encountered one before, so maybe part of the work is about trying to imagine that or trying to recover this image that has kind of vanished from the Queen, because whenever you see the image of the Queen, she's always this kind of very unsweaty figure without any creases on her dress. So I guess the work is about trying to imagine that. Yeah. The work was commissioned for the Kochi Miseris Biennial in India um, a few years ago in 2014, and in many ways I was also kind of responding to the site of Kochi itself, which is a port city, and it's a city that has really different layers of colonial histories. So in its history, it has, you see the presence of the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British. And so that was one of the starting points, which was me really trying to respond to the colonial histories of that site. But I guess when the work really came together for me was, as I described it in the work itself, when I encountered this image of this anthropologist, or rather this mannequin of this anthropologist, in this anthropological museum in Amsterdam, the Tropenmuseum, and noticed a very strange detail, which was the fact that they depicted the sweat on this anthropologist, even though it's just a sculpture, a mannequin. And it did make me think about why was this such an unfamiliar image. The image of the colonial man as a sweating figure is not a figure that you often see in the kind of official archival historical photographs. More often than not, he is wearing this kind of white colonial outfit, completely unblemished, which is completely impossible if you were living in the tropics, and if you were, even if you were not working out in the sun. It's a sweaty environment to be in. So I guess that is the starting point. That was the starting point for me in terms of trying to recover this image that has somehow disappeared, which is the image of colonial sweat. In the work, I see myself as really trying to rework some of these tropes and these images that often circulate, and a large part of the work is really trying to trace or track this history through this singular image that is sweat. An image that is sometimes you can say not quite an image because it's so hard to, it evaporates, it vanishes, but it also leaves stains sometimes, sweat. And I guess a part of the work is really about trying to be attentive to these stains, these traces that remain even as a particular kind of historical narrative tries to wipe them away. So that is, in a way, a kind of resistance or a kind of protest against forgetting that I'm trying to do. The images really come from all over the place, which is a tendency in terms of how I work and how I gather my images. But a lot of it comes from cinema, and partly because I'm very inspired and influenced by cinema. So a lot of the images are excerpts from films, but there are also kind of archival photographs, but also more kind of contemporary images. Because in many ways, the conditions that I'm trying to describe is not a historical condition. It also very much affects the present. And for me, the work that I do is about trying to draw these connections between different images that may seem quite far apart from each other, images that may come from different parts of the world or different time periods, but because these images circulate, you can read and map relationships between them, and often these are relationships that are shot through with power, or you can read power relations in these interactions. I think what is important is also that this is a work that is not about a history that has passed And it's very much looking at the kind of inheritances that have been passed on from the colonial period. You know, how certain power structures, although it no longer goes by the name of colonialism, it still retains some of its initial logic. And in the work itself, what I'm really trying to map is really this transition between the late colonial period and what we call, you know, the age of globalization. And in many ways, if we talk about globalization, Germany is pretty much at the center of this narrative in terms of pushing towards the global, even if you read it even within a kind of European politics itself. So I think the resonance also goes beyond, you know, looking at this colonial history. It's really about thinking about how those histories still continue to inform the way the world is organized today. So I hope there would certainly be some resonances with the local audience.